Hello, hello. Welcome to week 1 of pre-calculus. So this week is essentially a review of college algebra. We're going to be looking at functions and their graphs. So you're going to be reading 5 sections for this week. You have 1.1, which is rectangular coordinates, 1.2, graphs of equations, going on to section 3, linear equations in 2 variables, then functions, and analyzing graphs of functions. That last one I am going to be doing a live session on. I believe I have it scheduled for Monday, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm going to be using Desmos and graphing to kind of show how you can take a look at functions, transformations, all those good things. So this week you have 4 tasks that are graded, and this is standard for most weeks with the exception of week 4 and week 8. So you have a week 1 discussion, a week 1 self-assessment, a week 1 application assignment, and a week 1 journal. So there's 4 things that you're turning in each week. So make sure that you are aware of that and you're doing all of those things. So let's first talk about the discussion. So the discussion prompt comes in 2 parts. So the first part is the standard introduction to yourself, sharing some information about you, just whatever you want to share so we can get to know you and we can start forming a learning community. The second part of the discussion is topic-based and about this week's topics. So you need to identify something in your life that is a function. And when you do this, explain why it is a function, how it fits the definition of a function. Then identify the domain and range of this real-world situation. And you want to make sure your domain and range makes sense, because if you're doing something about distance and you say the domain includes negatives, you don't have negative distance. So your domain and range need to make sense. And then explain why you think it's important to describe things as functions. So there's going to be 3 parts that I'm looking for here, and if you don't have all of these parts as a part of your discussion, then you will not earn full credit. So taking a look at how the discussions are graded, let's take a look at the rubric. So this is the rubric that is available, that's you can click on, you can read it. So you have 3 sections on your main post. The first is that the student explores multiple aspects pertaining to the weekly topic. So that's going to be, did you talk about all the things that were listed for you to talk about? Because that's the multiple aspects. So if you talked about all those 3 things in full, you would get the full 5 points here. If you don't, if you miss some, or you could have gone further, then you go to proficient, developing, and then needs improvement. So that's going to be based off of, did you talk about all the things that were listed in the prompt? The next section is student articulates a clearly focused viewpoint pertaining to the weekly content or topic. So this is basically, so it says students focused on one aspect of the weekly topic. I don't care so much about the one aspects part. Articulates an argument viewpoint that is well reasoned. So as far as math goes, I'm looking at, does your stuff make sense? So is clearly focused means, does this make sense? Is it correct? Are you saying things that are correct? So that's worth 10 points for full credit. And so if everything you say is correct and is detailed, you'll get the full credit for 10 points. If not, if you have some things that are not quite right, then you'll be down in proficient and down from there. Then we've got student supports viewpoint with data reference to relevant literature. So this is basically, so if we look at the full credit here, it says student cites and summarizes data or material taken from the current literature of the field, expertly incorporates information as supporting evidence to back up the viewpoint. So as far as math classes go, I'm going to look, do you have data to back up what you're saying? And data means, have you created an equation that can prove what you're saying? Do you have used numbers? Are you actually using math to back up what you're saying? And then on the research-based ones, or if you did research, are you citing your references? So to get full credit here, you need to have cited any references that you use, especially if you're doing research. And then you also need to be using some sort of math to back up what you're saying. So since this week you're talking about whether something is a function, you're talking about domain and range, show me the domain and range in mathematical notation. That will tell me that you are doing this, that you're fulfilling, you're backing up, you're proving your point using math. And if you've done some research to find some real world examples, then include those links, because if you don't, then you are not supporting yourself and you won't get the full credit. So that's how the main posts are graded based off of this rubric that we have in the classroom. So now let's take a look at the reply posts. So these are pretty much the standard replies. For each reply, you need to advance the conversation through comments and additional questions. So for full credit, you want to have really good, like, replies. Usually they're several sentences. You're actually having a conversation, providing information. So student analyzes and evaluates the viewpoint, reasoning, and supportive evidence offered in the initial post of peers, provides additional data or information that advances the discussion of the weekly topic in a meaningful direction. So that's the exemplary full credit. So you want to make sure, usually really good replies are 3 or 4 sentences. They really are reflecting on the material and what the other person said. If they're not so reflective, if you kind of mention things the other person said, but you haven't really got into it, then you'll go into the next category of proficiency. So that's how both of the reply posts work. And then there are 5 points for grammar, spelling, punctuation, citations. So I don't take off points for citations in here because that was included in the main post as far as references go. So this is mainly, do you have good grammar, spelling? Because you're typing everything up, you can put it in Word first and do spell check or whatever you need to do. So because it's not off the cuff, you need to plan and do research. We are looking for good grammar. So full credit, perfect or nearly perfect presentation in written form. So that's the grading of discussions in a nutshell and how I'm going to be using this rubric to grade your discussions. So other discussion requirements, and these are stated in the rules of discussions that are linked in the first discussion post. You have a 75-word minimum. The main post is due Sunday night. You have 2 reply posts that are a minimum of 2. You can do as many as you want, but a minimum of 2 reply posts to classmates by Tuesday. And then your replies need to be substantive. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, they're usually several sentences long. They need to actually be advancing the conversation. You could be asking questions, answering questions, challenging others if you disagree, explain, say what you disagree about, explain why. If people have asked you questions, you're answering those questions, so you're actually interacting in the discussion. So let's move on to assignments. So you have 2 assignments. You have an application assignment and a journal entry. So let's first talk about the application assignment. So your application assignment is applying the math that you've learned this week to real world problems, essentially. So that's why it's called application. So there are typically 5 problems that you are working on, and the assignment's worth 100 points. So if you do the math, that's about 20 points per problem. But some problems are less work than others, so I actually do it based off of the number of steps that are required. So if you have a problem that requires 2 steps, it's going to be worth fewer points than one that requires 5 or 6 steps. So I want to make sure that the difficulty of the problem is reflected in the number of points that it's worth. So in order to get full credit, you do need to show all of your steps. Don't say, oh, my instructor knows what I'm doing, and just not show it. You need to prove to me that you know what you're doing, because I am grading this based off of, do you understand the concepts? Do you know what you're doing? And if you don't show work, you have not proved that to me. So showing work proves that you know what you're doing, because you've clearly documented and communicated every step that you did. So I'm going to be looking for your work, and plus that gives me feedback on where you lost points. If you don't show steps, I don't know where your mistake was, and I can't help you. So that's how the grading is. It's basically going to be on how many steps each problem is required and the key things that I'm looking for in each problem, and whether you did that or not, and made mistakes from there. I do allow resubmissions, so if you find that you really bombed something, you can resubmit. There is a 5% penalty for a resubmission, but that's not much compared to the points you could gain back. So just a note here, you want to be working on your reflection journal as you do the application assignment, because the reflection journal is connected to the assignment. So the week 1 reflection journal is for this, you are to talk about your process for solving each problem of the assignment. So it's a problem solving process. You're writing down your thoughts as you're trying to work on the application assignment. There are questions. If you look at the assignment requirements, there are leading questions to help you out. But if you just write through your thoughts and say, oh, I tried this didn't work, then I tried this, or, I saw this problem, I knew, oh, this is this type of problems from this section. Talk about your problem-solving process. Talk about which ones were easy, which ones were hard, explain why. If you used resources to help, like if you used tutor.com, let me know I had to use a tutor on this problem. If you used a friend, if you used a website or a YouTube video, say that. If you use website or YouTube videos, give me the links because that way I can share them with others. And if they're helpful, that's good to know for future. But talk about, oh, these are the resources I used. How did they help? How did you use them to help you out? Be very detailed. There is a requirement that this needs to be 250 words minimum. So your grading is based off of the length of your reflection. Did you meet that minimum word count? And it's also based off of content in that, are you actually reflecting on your problem-solving process of the application assignment? If you're not, then you will lose points because you're not doing what the directions say. So you can lose points if it's not long enough or if you're not following directions. This must be submitted as a Word document. I do not want to see things typed up in the comment box. I do not want to see things typed up in just the text box. Submit a Word document because that way I can leave feedback, answer questions you have, and so forth. So if you do not do that, it will be returned back to you. For your application assignment, when you submit this, you want to make sure that all the problems and parts are clearly numbered and in order. Make sure you box or highlight your final answer. And you can submit these either as a Word document where you've typed up your math, as a photo, but make sure your photo isn't blurry. If you have multiple photos, make sure you have a single document. So either put them in a Word document or turn them into PDFs. There are some suggestions there on how to do that. And make sure everything's in order so it's easy for me to follow. You can also scan your work. So if you have access to a scanner, you can do that. Just again, make sure everything is in order. Any submissions that don't follow these requirements will be returned with a score of a 2 to indicate that you need to resubmit because if these things are out of order or hard to read, it's hard for me to grade. So the last thing that you need to do is the self-assessment. So this is like a quiz. So the self-assessment is 14 questions for this week. You have 4 attempts. So you can just keep taking it up to 4 attempts, and the highest score is what's safe. So if you take it and then you're like, oh, I didn't do so good, that kind of, it's a self-assessment. Take it maybe even at the beginning of the week, see what you know, go back, study those things, and then retake it. It covers everything on week 1, so it's assessing how well you learned the material for week 1. So I have a suggested schedule linked in the class to kind of help you organize everything. So I know this is a little small, but I recommend doing a section a day, and then there are additional readings and videos that you can do. But there are videos that go with each. There are note-taking that you can do with each. So I've sort of arranged everything out. There are no suggested practice problems in the classroom, so I have picked some out. So if you want to know how to practice these, then you're going to want to download my suggested schedule to see which ones I suggest you do. And then I've also mapped out the which questions on the application assignment can go with each section. So that can also help you complete the assignment if you're not sure how to do the problem or where to find it. So I recommend following the suggested schedule, modifying it to your use, but at least it will give you a guideline. So that's basically it for week 1. If you have questions, you can email me, you can give me a call, you can send me a Hangout message. And I look forward to working with you guys this week, and I will do another one of these, of course, with each week going forward so you know what to expect. All right, I hope you guys are having a great day, and I will talk to you later.